So I want to welcome everyone near and afar to this continuing sequence of teachings by Hazrat Inayat on the subject of the ego. A very important subject for us. I invite all of those here and at a distance to join in the Sufi invocation of Hazrat Inayat. Towards the One, the perfection of love, harmony and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. And let us take a few moments of silence to truly, truly do as this prayer says, invoking the presence of the various masters, saints, and prophets. Leo, it's okay, sweetheart. Who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. So I remind people that we are in a residential environment, and there may be some coming and going and residential noise like power tools or lawnmowers. So that's part of the ambiance, we would say. Again, nothing can keep the Master, saints, and prophets from our presence. And so we invoke all of those that have gone before, all of those that are with us now on this earth, and all of those that shall come in the future, that have brought the light of wisdom to humanity. And again, let us say the Sufi invocation as given by Hazrat Inayat. Towards the One, the perfection of love, harmony and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. As it was said, the teachings continue on the subject of moral culture, and again, specifically on the subject of training the ego. And so I think as a reflection of what's brought us to the teaching today, it may be good to hear a review of some of the things that were said in our last class on the subject of the ego. And so I share a few quotes from actually the previous two teachings. And again, this is from Sufi Message Volume 13, the Gathas on the subject of morals. And the first teaching that we had as we begin this new cycle, which is on, it is actually Gatha 2 on the morals, moral culture, you might say. It was on the training of the ego, necessity and avidity, and a few lines from that teaching. Hazrat Inayat says, in the satisfaction of the bodily appetites, there are two things, necessity and avidity. A satisfaction which is necessary for existence is one thing. An ever-increasing joy in the satisfaction of bodily appetites is another thing. Intense desire for bodily satisfaction has a bad influence on one's mentality, which acts psychically unfavorably on oneself and one's surroundings. It produces jealousy, envy, and greed in nature. And if the thought currents are strong, it produces psychical poisonous effects. When we consider the whole unrest of the present time in the world, we find that it is caused by the physical ego. The wars and revolutions seem to have the desire for comfort and pleasure and for more earthly gain behind them. And since the whole happiness of the world depends upon the moral standard of the majority, it is upon the education of the human being in the psychic law of happiness that the peace of the world depends. And so in that month, and again that's for review, we have recorded these teachings, we talked about this aspect of resist not evil, not giving in or feeding this impulse of others to erode away or to affect our actions, our thoughts, our words and deeds by these poisonous effects that can come towards us. It is better to not resist, but to offer illumination for ourselves, wisdom within ourselves, when this may come towards us, when this influence is given as a vibration to the world, so that we can become steadfast in our faith, in our courage, and in love and in light, which Murshida teaches so much. I often see it as this little game sometimes of tug of war. And you remember playing that as children where you have a rope and you're either one-on-one or a group of people pulling. And of course, as long as each group has the tension, the game continues, doesn't it? Right? You go this way a little bit, you go this way a little bit, but that rope has that tension. But what happens if you just let go? You see? Resist not evil. If you let go, the opponent just, from their own force of pulling, topples down on side of themselves. Really, it's an interesting thing to think about. So our diligence in trying to defend or protect even isn't quite necessary. Sometimes it's just letting go, a release. And all of a sudden, what happens? Boop. Right? And Jesus used to say that, turn the other cheek. But you know, if you imagine it from a physical point of view, let's just take it from that, not alone the many levels of symbolic meaning that that quote could have for us, but turning the other cheek. You see, if you stubbornly look at the opponent while they're ready to slap you, look what happens. Boy, that could really hurt. But as they come towards you, if you just turn the other cheek, what happens? You see, it's very good advice. Very good advice. You see, so sometimes one absolutely needs to stand one's ground, but one wants to determine in which way one's standing one's ground to defend oneself. Sometimes it's very good to defend a principle or someone that needs protection. This is very good. But there are other times. The martial arts also teaches it. This doesn't it? If you stand very firmly as the opponent's force comes towards you, it's going to knock you over. But if you just let the force of that action, you kind of help it along, then it just moves past us. Wonderful things to remember. And these are very physical examples. But in the hidden dimension of our inner world and the subtle vibrations that exist in the world, all of these things could be remembered. Because even our thoughts provide that type of war. Even the inner defenses of how we defend our actions or our cause or our stand can be a way that we perpetuate the game, the drama. It's very good lessons for us. And in a way, it helps us absolutely free ourselves from these attachments. And I love the Buddhist teaching where it teaches us, and perhaps Joe, you can quote exactly because you're such a good student, but it's this whole idea of, and I think Jesus gave us that example, and of course in this season especially, at least in the Christian tradition when we're reflecting on Jesus' journey to the cross and beyond, the idea that we absolutely are indifferent to both praise and blame. We can sit in the middle of a peaceful state of mind, knowing that praise is temporary, impermanent, and that blame also is. And that these conditions are dependent upon perhaps the projection of another. And it's good, of course, to check to see if there's an inner connection to what may be projected towards us. But if one's sincere, one can be blamed, doesn't matter. One can be praised, it doesn't matter. All one has to do is watch the media for just a little while, and you can see that there's people are glorified, and then in the next day they're struck down. You see, if one is concerned about public opinion, so to speak, one can never live one's life and be in one's truth. So these lessons relate to that very much, I think. Any comments or questions? One thing could be said, and it is said, at least in English we say, if someone gives you lemons, make lemonade, right? No use in being sour about it. Take it and transform it into something delicious.